Normally, when people talk about visual novels in relationship to anime, people talk about things like this, where you have an anime adaptation of a visual novel. But in this video, I will not be talking about that. Instead, what I'll be talking about is things like this, where you have a visual novel that is a spin-off of an anime. Now, while the original might have, for instance, been a manga or a light novel, I consider them to be spin-offs based on the anime. Now, the reason for this is because they usually have artwork that much more so resembles the anime than the original, as well as using the same voice actors, and the events happening being more so based on what happened in the last season of the anime rather than how far the manga has gotten. When I started reading visual novels, I began with these visual novels based on anime, and I've read quite a lot of them by now. So in this video, I'll go through my opinions on the visual novels based on anime that I've read, and hopefully someone will find it somewhat helpful, as these titles aren't particularly popular, and thus it's quite hard to actually find information about them. First off, I guess I should start with the very first visual novel that I ever read, which is Nisekoi Yomeiri. Now, I have a lot of fond memories about this visual novel, and I remember quite a lot of things I liked about it, for instance how some of the gameplay mechanics were mainly used for comedy, like for instance a HP bar that would go down whenever Shitoge hit Raku, or Raku ate any food that Shitoge or Onodera made. There was also creative usage of the choice system that expanded on jokes found in the anime. The routes were also quite varied, with one of them being a tearjerker, and one playing a lot on nostalgia and having an ending that was a really great reference to a scene that happened before in the anime, as well as some other routes just being very funny. The thing about Nisekoi Yomeiri, though, is that I might not be the very best judge on this particular title in general. You see, this was the very first visual novel that I read, and it's also the first thing I've read in Japanese outside of textbooks. As such, let's just say my reading speed was rather slow. While I understood most things, it took me quite a long time to read things compared to my current reading speed, and as such I might have not noticed things such as whether routes or scenes were too short to normally make an impact. I also struggled with a gameplay system where you had to spell certain words in Japanese. I didn't know, for instance, to call Shitoge leader when she wanted me to call her that during a scene at a petting zoo. Though I blame Japanese not really having the letter L. I mean, how the hell was I supposed to know that leader starts with ri? Other than, actually paying attention to the previous scene. Now, moving on from Nisekoi Yomeiri to Tula-Bru, Darkness True Princess. First, I want to say that making a Tula-Bru visual novel for the Vita is in general quite a bad idea. Almost as bad as, actually buying it. Now, for anyone not familiar with Tula-Bru, it's a manga which has an anime adaptation, which is quite perverted, and a lot of it is driven by a perverted comedy. Now, while this was released before Sony's very strict crackdown on the sexy Japanese games, the general guidelines were not that open for sexual games in general, even before that. And as such, it had to be censored quite a lot, so this is very toned down compared to the original manga as well as the anime. You see, you just have to think of the children in these cases, right? This thing, it's rated 17+, definitely really available for children. But of course, if you put like boobs in things like Shonen Jump, that's not really a problem because I mean we all know that like 10-year-olds would like never buy Shonen Jump at all. But they definitely want to buy like $60 games rated 17 plus for the PlayStation Vita. Wait, what was I talking about again? Oh yes, To Love Through Darkness Through Princes. Well, outside of the sexy jokes and images being very tame, it's somewhat decent enough of an experience. It has some nice parts, but it also has some rather boring parts. The worst offender, in my opinion, is Yami's Route, which features a lot of scenes taken from the anime, which are, of course, made tamer and often with the most funny part removed. It also has an ending that takes a very cliche common thing and just uses it in the most like boring, yeah, way that you can think of. So yeah, that route in particular is really bad, but some of the routes are like decent enough. Now, would I recommend this? No, you've got better things to spend your time on. Just look at your plan to watch list and my anime lists. Those anime aren't gonna watch themselves, so you should rather do that instead of reading this. But if you for some reason end up picking this up, well, you'll probably be somewhat disappointed, but hey, it's not the worst thing out there. I mean, some of it's not too bad, there are some decent enough parts in there. I am, however, quite salty about one bug, which makes it so you can't save the visual novel once you're close to having gone through every scene in the visual novel, and you also can't continue on from a certain point. So, yeah, that's quite annoying to not be able to complete the visual novel fully. But hey, it's only been out for like 5.5 years now, so I'm sure they'll patch it soon enough. Sakura-sou no Pet no Kanojo. This is the first of the visual novels I'm talking about that doesn't bother adding anything to differentiate itself from the anime or the light novel in the title. Now, the story of the visual novel, though, is at least original. At least I'm pretty sure. I haven't read the light novel, so I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think this is what happens in the light novel after the anime. Now, for the visual novel itself, I remember it being a pretty nice read, with it managing to do the characters as well as the comedy I remember from the anime quite well, though I don't think it ever felt like it reached the same level as the anime. So yeah, the visual novel part itself is quite nice in my opinion, at least from what I can remember. It's been like 5 years. Now, one thing that wasn't good though was the goddamn gameplay system. You see, for some annoying reason, it seems like the people who made these visual novels based on anime think that to justify them, well, they need to add a gameplay system. Now, of course, they can't just add no good gameplay with depth in it or anything that would be costly, so yeah, they just tend to suck ass, and most of the time they're only really annoying you when you're trying to read the visual novel.
The gameplay system for Sakura-sou no Pet no Kanojo was my first experience with how detrimental a gameplay system can be to a visual novel. So, in this visual novel, the people at Sakura-sou enters a game-making competition. And you go through different events, and based on what you choose, you get into different parts, which leads to them making different genres of game, with each character having a story linked to each of these game genres. Now, this system I remembered to just find way too complicated, and I ended up having to use a guide to figure out how to get the different endings, and was forced to look it up all of the time. Now, there's a lot to navigate within the system, which made it really annoying to go through all the different routes. Now, to add insult to this, there's also one scene for each route with a CG, and this requires you to go through the route 2 times. So at the end of a route, you get this new game plus thing where you get a mark on your save file, and this unlocks this scene, which you have to get to the end of that route to unlock it. So you're going to have to go through all of the routes 2 times to get all of the scenes and to get all of the CGs. I've no idea how they managed to find out that this was a good idea, but yeah, for some reason they decided that, you need to skip through the route that you've already gone through just so you can get a CG.
Okay, so let's talk about the visual novel about the toxic Himouto. Himouto Umaru Himouto Ikusei Keikaku is actually, in my opinion, a pretty decent visual novel. As far as comparisons to the anime, I'd say it has a bit more in common with the feeling of the second season rather than the first season, and it also takes some plot points from the second season, though it doesn't really try to outright copy the second season. Now, I don't think it's any masterpiece, but I mean, it's pretty good. There are some nice scenes between the girls, and the routes are also quite good, has some funny moments, and they're also a bit bolder and has more interesting direction than what I'm used to in these visual novels based off of anime. As for the gameplay, it has a racing sim aspect to it where you force Umaru to do different activities to raise stats. Now, I don't remember the system itself being that bad. That could just be it being overshadowed by how bad the Sakura-sou system was, but it's a bit more complex than I generally would have liked, but it wasn't that bad. If it weren't for one small problem. You see, I have a special trait, which is called being a completionist, and when it comes to visual novels, I need to unlock all of the CGs and do all of the endings. Well, the problem with this is that the Umaru visual novel has a small extra scene after the regular ending where Umaru ends up with a job in the future, and this, of course, depends on the combination of stats you got. So some of them requires maxing out 1 or 2 specific stats, so that means finding a guide, and there are 16 of these endings, so maybe I should just re-roll my traits.